The Hungarian Second Army was one of 3 field armies raised by the Kingdom of Hungary which saw action during World War II. All 3 armies were formed on March 1, 1940. The Second Army was the best equipped Hungarian formation at the beginning of the war, but was virtually eliminated as an effective fighting unit by overwhelming Soviet force during the Battle of Stalingrad, suffering 84% casualties. Towards the end of the war, the reformed Second Army fought more successfully at the Battle of Debrecen, but, during the ensuing Siege of Budapest, it was destroyed completely and absorbed into the Hungarian Third Army. Commanders. The Hungarian Second Army had 4 commanders from March 1, 1940 to November 13, 1944. Colonel General Vitez Gustav Jani, from March 1, 1940 to August 5, 1943. Colonel General G. E. Acute Z. A. Lakatos, from August 5, 1943, to April 1, 1944. Lieutenant General Lafos Veras Vandalnoki, from April 1, 1944, to October 16, 1944. Lieutenant General Geno Major, from October 16, 1944, to November 13, 1944. Occupation duties. The Kingdom of Hungary was a reluctant member of the Axis at the beginning of the European conflict. Hungary's head of state was Regent Admiral Miklos Horthy and the government was led by Prime Minister Pál Teleki. On April 3, 1941, Teleki committed suicide when it became clear that Hungary was to take part in the invasion of Yugoslavia, its erstwhile ally. The comparatively small Hungarian army had a peacetime strength of only 80,000 men. Militarily, the nation was divided into 7 corps commands. Each army corps consisted of 3 infantry divisions, each of which comprised 3 infantry regiments and an artillery regiment. Each corps also included 2 cavalry brigades, 2 motorized infantry brigades, an anti-aircraft battery, a signal company, and a cavalry reconnaissance troop. On March 11, 1940, the Hungarian army was expanded to 3 field armies, each with 3 corps. All 3 of these field armies were to see action against the Red Army before the end of the war. Hungary did not immediately participate in Operation Barbarossa, the German invasion of the Soviet Union. Adolf Hitler did not directly ask for, nor necessarily want, Hungarian assistance at the time. Most of the Hungarian forces, including the 3 field armies, were initially relegated to duties within the enlarged Hungarian state. Hungary regained substantial portions of its territories that had been ceded following the loss of World War I and the resultant Treaty of Trianon. At the end of June 1941, Germany summoned Hungary to join in the attack on the Soviet Union. Hungary continued to resist joining in the war. The matter was settled on June 26, 1941, when the Soviet Air Force bombed Košice. The Kingdom of Hungary declared war on the Soviet Union the next day, June 27, 1941. At first, only Hungary's Carpat Group with its integral, Rapid Corps was sent to the Eastern Front, in support of the German 17th Army. Towards the end of 1941, only the exhausted and battle-weary, Rapid Corps was left. But, before Horthy would gain Hitler's consent to withdraw the Rapid Corps, he had to agree to deploy an even larger Hungarian force. On the Eastern Front, of the 3 Hungarian field armies, High Command decided to send the Second Army. However, the armed forces in general were so poorly equipped that practically all modern equipment was provided to the Second Army. Even after these desperate measures, the Second Army still lacked adequate motorized transport and especially anti-armor weapons. Germany has promised to provide the necessary equipment, but failed to deliver any meaningful quantities. Practically all the armored units Hungary had were reorganized into the 1st Hungarian Armored Division and attached to the Second Army. Similarly, almost all combat-worthy aircraft and supporting units were organized into the 1st Flight Group, also attached to the Second Army. For both the armored and air units, shortages in supplies and equipment lead to significant delays, and they were shipped to Russia significantly later than infantry units. By April 11, 1942, the 209,000-man strong Second Army was assigned to the German Army Group South in southern Russia. In June 1942, the Second Army became part of Army Group B in Operation Blue. Transportation of the army to the front line began on the 17th of April 1942, and the last units arrived by the 27th of June. During the transport, 19 of the total 822 railway trains suffered attack by Soviet guerrilla units, causing casualties. Voronezh. In June and July 1942, prior to the Battle of Stalingrad, the Hungarian Second Army was involved in the Battle of Voronezh as part of Army Group B, fighting in and around the city of Voronezh on the Don River. The Hungarian troops supported the German 4th Panzer Army against the defending Soviet Voronezh front. Though technically an Axis success, this Pyrrhic victory fatally delayed the arrival of the 4th Panzer Army in the Caucasus. During these operations, the Hungarian Second Army had suffered severe casualties in manpower, as without adequate air and armor support all assaults were carried out by infantry units only, against the skillful and determined defense conducted by the Soviet troops. Lack of transportation was so severe that there were examples of divisions marching over 1,000 kilometers on foot from their disembarkation points to the first contact with the enemy. Artillery support during the offensive was also limited for the same reason, leading to even worse infantry losses. The Don River, Operation Saturn, and disaster. The Hungarian Second Army is probably the best-known Hungarian wartime army because of the part it played in the Battle of Stalingrad. Before being sent to Russia, the rank and file of the Second Army had received but 8 weeks of training. The only tactical experience for many of these soldiers were the maneuvers held just prior to the departure for the front. This lack of preparation badly affected the soldiers' fighting abilities and morale when confronted with heavy tank assaults. Also, a significant part of the army was made up by reservists, who were promised a quick victory and became demoralized as the prospects for getting home soon were worsening. In 1942, the Hungarian Second Army was given the task of protecting the 8th Italian Army's northern flank between Novaya Pokrovka on the Don River and Rososh. This allowed the German 6th Army to continue to attack Soviet General Vasily Chukov's 62nd Army defending Stalingrad. As winter set in, and with the worsening German situation around Stalingrad, the Second Army's transportation collapsed and failed to supply even the basics for the frontline units. The cold, hungry and demoralized Second Army had to defend even longer and longer stretches of the front line as more and more German units were sent to Stalingrad. The Hungarian Second Army, as almost all of the armies protecting the flanks of the Sixth Army, was annihilated when the Soviets launched Operation Uranus, Operation Saturn, and Operation Little Saturn. As part of these operations, 2 Soviet pincers drove through the Romanian Third Army to the north of Stalingrad and the Romanian Fourth Army to the south, cutting off the Sixth Army. On December 12, 1942, as a counter-move, the Germans launched Operation Winter Storm to relieve the Sixth Army by by attacking through the pincers of the Soviet armies participating in Operation Uranus. The Soviets counter-attacked on December 16, 1942, and launched Operation Little Satin, penetrating between the Italian Eighth Army and the Hungarian Second Army near the junction held by the Italian Alpini and threatening the flank of German forces attempting to relieve the Sixth Army by cutting the would-be relievers off at the Donets River. With heavy losses, the Soviets conquered some areas west of the Don River, but were temporarily stopped and delayed in their advance. But on January 13, 1943, Russian forces, overwhelming in numbers and equipment, began the Voronezh-Kharkov strategic offensive operation with the Bryansk, Voronezh, and southwestern fronts simultaneously. The Soviet Red Army was totally successful this time. During the Ostrogozhsk-Rossosh offensive, the Russians rapidly destroyed the Hungarian Second Army near Svoboda on the Don River. An attack on the German Second Army further north threatened to bring about an encirclement of that army as well, though it managed to withdraw and was forced to retreat. By February 5, 1943, troops of the Russian Voronezh front were approaching Kharkov. The losses of the Second Army were made especially severe by the attitude of the Army Command, who forbade any sort of withdrawal, in spite of seeing the neighboring German and Italian armies pulling back. Most of the Hungarian units were encircled and either annihilated or forced to open terrain where they succumbed to the extreme cold. The 1st Armored Division was reduced to a single operational tank within a few days, and most of the personnel of the 1st Air Group died on the ground when their airfields were overrun by Soviet tanks. During its 12 months of activity on the Russian front, the Second Hungarian Army's losses were enormous. Of an initial force of about 200,000 Hungarian soldiers and 50,000 Jewish forced laborers, about 100,000 were dead, 35,000 wounded, and 60,000 taken prisoners of war. Only about 40,000 men returned to Hungary, scapegoated by Hitler for the catastrophic Axis defeat. No nation lost as much blood during World War II in such a short period of time. The Hungarian Second Army, as most other Axis armies in the Army Group B, ceased to represent a meaningful fighting force. The German Sixth Army, encircled in Stalingrad, surrendered on February 2, 1943. The remnants of the Hungarian Second Army returned to Hungary on May 24, 1943. Most of the field divisions sent to the Eastern Front as part of the Second Army in 1942 were light field divisions. In addition to the 3 infantry corps, the Hungarian Second Army included the 1st Armored Field Division. Most of the armor in this division was included in the 30th Tank Regiment. At the time of the Siege of Stalingrad, the primary battle tank in this unit was the Czechoslovakian Panzer 38. These were augmented by Hungarian Toldi tanks for scouting duties, Hungarian Nimrod armored self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, and Hungarian Sea-Saber armored cars. The tank regiment also had about 10 German Panzer IV, F2 tanks and a few German Panzer III tanks in its heavy tank battalion. Unfortunately, there were far too few of these better German tanks to make much difference. Attached to Army Group Fretapico, Hungary becomes a battlefield on March 19, 1944. Hungarian Regent Admiral Miklos Horthy surrounded himself with anti-fascists. Relations between Hungary and Germany became more and more difficult. Horthy met Hitler on April 16 and 17 at German headquarters, where he told Hitler, "We Hungarians have already lost 100,000 men in this bloody war, counting dead, wounded and missing. Those we have left have but few arms with which to fight. We cannot help you one bit more. We're through. We're doing our best to stave off the Bolshevik menace, and we won't be able to spare a single man for the Balkans. The German dictator arranged to keep Horthy busy by conducting negotiations while Hungary was quietly and efficiently overrun by German ground forces in a quick and bloodless invasion, Operation Margareta. Soon all of Hungary was to become a battlefield. By mid-August 1944, German Colonel General Johannes Friesner's Army Group South was on the brink of collapse. To the north, the Soviets' Operation Bagration was completing the destruction of the Axis Army Group Center. To the south, Germany's former ally, Romania, declared war on Germany on August 25, 1944, as a result of the Yassy-Kishinev strategic offensive. On the eve of the Soviet East Carpathian strategic offensive, as Soviet forces crossed the Hungarian border, Bulgaria, too, declared war on Germany. The subsequent Budapest strategic offensive attack by the Ukrainian Second and Third Fronts far into Hungary destroyed any semblance of an organized German defensive line. By this time, Fyodor Telbukin's Ukrainian Third Front, aided by the Ukrainian Second Front under Marshal of the Soviet Union Rodion Malinovsky, had annihilated 13 Axis divisions, capturing over 100,000 men. Wartime Mobilisation. On August 30, 1944, Hungary mobilized the reformed Hungarian Second Army and the Hungarian Third Army. Both armies were primarily composed of weak, undermanned, and under-equipped reserve divisions. General of Artillery Maximilian Fretapico's recently reformed German Sixth Army represented the nucleus of what remained of Friesner's force. By October 1944, seeing that his Hungarian allies were suffering from low morale, Friesner attached the recently reformed Hungarian Second Army under the command of Lieutenant General Lajos Veres von Dalnoki to Fretapico's army. The combination of German and Hungarian armies was designated Army Group Fretapico. The desertions of Bulgaria and Romania had opened a 650-kilometer gap in Friesner's Army Group South. As Friesner desperately struggled to reform a defensive line, news filtered through to Berlin that the Hungarian leader, Admiral Miklos Horthy, was preparing to sign a separate peace with the Soviet Union. If this happened, the entire front of Army Group South Ukraine would collapse. In August, Horthy replaced Prime Minister Domstoje with the anti-fascist General Ge Acute Zde Lakatos. Under Lakatos's regime, acting Interior Minister Be Acute La Horvath ordered Hungarian gendarmes to protect any Hungarian citizen from being deported. On October 15, 1944, Horthy announced that Hungary had signed an armistice with the Soviet Union, but most Hungarian army units ignored Horthy's orders, and the Germans reacted swiftly with Operation Panzerfaust. Commando lead Otto Skorzeny was sent to Hungary and, in another of his daring snatch operations, kidnapped Horthy's son, Miklos Horthy, Jr. The Germans insisted that Horthy abrogate the armistice, depose Lakatos's government, and name the leader of the Arrow Cross Party, Ferenc Szalasi, as prime minister. Instead, Horthy agreed to abdicate. Szalasi was able to take power in Hungary with Germany's backing. Success at the Battle of Debrecen and the end. Late in 1944, a reformed Hungarian Second Army enjoyed a modest level of combat success as an integral part of German General Maximilian Fretapico's army. Group Fretapico. From September 16 to October 24, 1944, during the Battle of Debrecen, Army Group Fretapico achieved a major success against the Debrecen offensive operation. While avoiding encirclement, Army Group Fretapico managed to severely maul 3 Soviet tank corps of Mobile Group Pliev under the command of Issa Pliev. The defeat of the Soviet Mobile Group by the combined German and Hungarian forces contrasted with Pliev's earlier victory over the untested Hungarian Third Army. However, the victory ultimately proved too costly to the Hungarians' armor and ammunition reserves, unable to replace equipment and personnel lost in the Battle of Debrecen. The Hungarian Second Army were smashed in December 1, 1944. Surviving units of the Second Army were transferred to the Third Army. By 1944, the main battle tank of the 2nd Armored Field Division was the Hungarian two-run medium tank, a limited improvement over the Czech Panzer 38 and the Hungarian Toldi tanks used by the 1st Armored Field Division in 1942. However, the two-run I tank and the two-run II tank were still no match for a standard Soviet T-34 tank, and, compared to the T-34 76th, the Soviets had many much improved T-34 85th tanks by 1944. Manufacture of the potentially more effective two-run III tank never developed beyond prototypes. Doubly unfortunate for the Hungarians, the few better German Panzer IV tanks, Panzer III tanks, and Sturmgeschütz III assault guns were never made available to them in numbers that would have made a difference.